Okay, so the last tutorial for the night is not related to mapping, but it's going to use the exact same methodology in the previous Grasshopper script to take what essentially is a heat map or a gradient map and turn that into a paving pattern for, say, a landscape plaza or some frit pattern for a building facade or that kind of thing. I like this method because it doesn't utilize typical conventions of gradients and Grasshopper, which is using like attractor points and attractor curves and all that crap. That stuff doesn't give me the result that I want. I like to have my control artistically over my pattern by brushing and stroking and painting this in Photoshop first and exporting this grading map and using this to be my map to the paving pattern. And then what I'll show you how to do is how to use some of the gray area here in the middle here and kind of mix pavers together. So it won't be like black, white, but in between, in the gray areas, there'll be a random mix of pavers. So it has like more of a kind of a cool gradient look to it. So it's a bit more of a, it look more like a kind of a flow to that. Anyway, enough talking, let's get to Grasshopper. So in Grasshopper, you're gonna want to go to the top view real quick. You're gonna use the picture frame tool, and you're gonna want to bring that image in. So I'm gonna just find it real quick, wherever I saved it. Sorry, this time to use gradient. And ideally, you'd want this image to be at the scale of whatever your plaza is or whatever your site is, but just for the sake of sure, I'm just gonna do an arbitrary scale. This doesn't have a scale yet. What you want to do is you want to take, Grasshopper, and you want to overlay a paving pattern on top of this. So you could manually overlay a herringbone pattern or a running bond pattern or whatever pattern you want on top of this at the right size, at the right paver size that you want to specify. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to make a very generalized paving pattern using Lunchbox. In Lunchbox, there's this thing called staggered quads. And if you plug that in here, it just kind of gives you a basic grid of brick pavers there. And I like this because each grid is essentially one closed curve, which is perfect. So just adjust this UV val to be the resolution you want it to be. Ideally, again, this would be actually the actual size of the pavers of your actual site. You don't want to use you want to use a standard size paver as opposed to an arbitrary size paver here. But again, this is just a tutorial. I'm not gonna get too gritty. That looks okay. I think it could be even denser. So let's make it 100. And maybe let's make this 60. Okay, so same exact methodology that I did in the previous one. What we're going to do is I'm going to reparameterize the surface. I'm going to get a point on that surface, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the area of each panel, essentially. That gives you the centroid. We're going to use the SLX command, surface line, and do a line SDL tool. From that centroid, do a line up. Plug that line in here, plug it in there like that. So now what you get is a UV number that represents a coordinate on each of those points. We're going to do that. We're going to bring in the image sampler, bring in that gradient pattern that we made in Photoshop earlier. So where did I save it? There it is. Okay, make sure you have the color brightness option selected here. Click OK. Plug in the UV value into the image sampler like that. And now what we're going to have is essentially a set of numbers between 0 and 1 that represents a numerical value at the intersection of each of these centers of our panels. Let me just turn a curve on and plug in that to that. At the center of each of these pavers, and a numerical value between 0 and 1. So just to illustrate that fact, we're going to, let me just make sure that those tree structures for these two lists are the same real quick. 600 is grafted, so this needs to be grafted. So this is now like that. That's not like that. So then I see these two tree structures match. So now we can work with both of these at the same time. For instance, let's say you want to do a larger than option. And you want to get every paver that has a numerical value larger than, say, let's just put a number slider here, 0.25. Then use a cull pattern to use this true and false Boolean that just created, plug that into the P here and plug that into there like that. You can begin to see like you have begun to isolate the pavers into, a range of values between 0 and 1. And in theory, you could end it right there. You could say, for instance, I want these pavers as one, then invert the pavers for the other one, so you get two pavers, one, and you can have both of those at different colors. Let me just hide this background map so you can see this more clearly. So you can have two paver colors, one that has maybe a black paver, or one maybe it's a white paver. Not for me, not good enough for me. I want something a bit more cool and more of a gradient. So what I'm going to teach you guys is a way to make this number here and turn it essentially into a percentage. So you look at this number here, so see, like, you know, it's like 0.4. What if we wanted this to be like, basically say there's a 40% chance that this paver is a black paver. Contrasting this like up here, like there's a 100% chance if there's a 1 that this paver is a black paver. So it actually adds a bit of a randomness to it and adds a bit of a gradient to that ultimate result. Obviously 0 means a 0% chance it's that color, and it'll be the invert of that color. What you need to do is you need to add a factor of randomness to this list of numbers here. So type in random and create a pseudo list of random numbers. And what you notice this random list is there's a box and there's a cat in that box. That's extremely important because I like cats. Add. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a range of numbers between 0 and 1. How many numbers do we want? We want the number of random numbers to be matched the number of items we have in this list here. So type in list length, plug in this number into, actually no, you want to actually get the list length of the number of curves. So plug in this to there like that, flatten the list so that you get basically the number of pavers that you have total, 6,000 something. Plug that into the end value here. And then there's a random seed. This is just a number to kind of plug into the randomness algorithm. That doesn't, it can be any number you want. Right now it's 2. That doesn't matter. So what you want to do is you want to add this number between 0 and 1 to this number here. Like that. And, oh, I made a mistake. Why did I make a mistake, guys? So if you make a mistake, you can like punch escape on your keyboard and it might kill the function. Why was that a mistake? Because I forgot to check this list structure for both these things. This is a flattened list and this is not. That is how, again, like I said, how Grasshopper crashes. I need to graph this list here. So now those structures are identical. Now I can add it. I was about to kill Grasshopper, but not today. Not on my watch. There, now I see it didn't crash. So the list of numbers here now has a range between 0 and 2. But if you think about it, if you add a random number between 0 and 1 to 1, it's always going to be greater than 1, right? If you add a random number to, say, 0, it will always be less than 1. So you can use that logic, if you're getting me, to apply this culling larger than value, and then I'll just show you what I mean here. Type in, use this larger than option here, plug in this number now into that, and then edit the slider to be a range between 0 and 2, because that's the actual range of our numbers here. And now if you use the cull pattern, plug in that option there and plug in the list there. You see, this is what I'm saying. Like, this gives you that kind of randomness gradient to that. Basically, everywhere where it's the darkest has the highest chance of being, say, a black paver. And everywhere it's not black, it has a lesser chance. But there is still a possibility that it could happen. It's just not as great because of that gradient. And you can change this number here to essentially adjust that gradient pattern. So then what you do is you essentially take this number here, or take this component here and reverse that list, invert it. So now you have two options for a paving pattern. And you can even take this one step further. You can take this, if you wanted to, you can copy that. You can cull the actual numbers. So let's say you think this, let's turn this off for a second. Let's say this, we are pretty confident that this is going to be one color of a paver. So we're going to leave that there. And then we want to get this You want to cull, this is confusing, you want to cull the actual values that you're sampling again, and then you want to take this larger than, and you want to sample those values there. Then you want to use another cull pattern. Sorry, I don't know if anyone's going to follow me here, but you can use this number here to cull another list like that, cull this list using this pattern here, so you can get even finer gradient. Invert that. So now what you have is 3. 1, 2, 3. Let me just adjust this. Let me turn this off first. So let's see. That's one paver. That's 2 pavers. That's your 3rd paver right there. All right, enough fun. Let's just bake these guys and show you what the result is. So bake this first paver on layer 1, bake. Bake the second one on layer 2, bake. Bake the 3rd one on layer 3, bake. And I know you guys aren't, I can just take this script and just email it to you guys. Which I highly, highly don't think is the right way to learn Grasshopper, but you know. And there you go. So if I unhide the gradient map, you can see that it follows that pattern very closely. And then what you can do is you can, let's turn that off. Let's just take this. And so the last thing we do today is we're going to take this, export that into Illustrator, and just make it look good. Paving. Save. Okay. Okay, so now I got an Illustrator, and then just basically take these. Let's say these ones are going to be the light pavers, so make these a light gray. Take the next tier, make that a mid gray, and take this last tier here and make that a dark gray. And the results is a pretty nice looking paving pattern that you can use to maybe tell a story about your site, for instance. Like maybe there's an element of guiding people through the site in a specific way. You want to use the paving pattern to illustrate that, or you want to visualize some kind of text motif or something like that. But let's compare that to the original gradient to see how we went from that to that. Well, you can't see.